Hi, Sally Walker here, your hormone and slow age expert. So, blood sugar, how do we measure it? How do we know what it is? Is it something we can do ourselves, or do we have to go to the doctors? You can measure it yourself, you absolutely can, and there are different ways you can do this, and we'll have a little talk about it. But you can also go to your doctors and ask for them to measure it for you. Okay. But before we look at the different ways, let's talk about what blood sugar should be measuring. So we can measure it in something called millimoles per litre, and we can measure it in milligrams per deciliter. Okay, so if you have some blood tests from your doctor, have a little look and you'll see the letters mmol/L, that's millimoles per litre, or you might see the letters mg/D. DL, milligrams per deciliter. Okay, now which countries use which? Well, in Europe we tend to use the millimoles per litre. Sometimes in the UK you'll use milligrams per deciliter. The US definitely use milligrams per deciliter. Okay, I work with millimoles per litre mostly, so that's what I'm really going to stick with. But what level should it be? So blood sugar in general should be somewhere between 4 and 7 millimoles a litre, or 72 and 140 milligrams per deciliter. Okay. So how do you test it, or how do you know? Do you know? Are there symptoms of being low or being high? Well, some people do not register any symptoms, but most people register symptoms when the blood sugar is on its way down. So if it's hovering around 4 or 72 milligrams per deciliter, then you probably will have symptoms like you feel a bit faint, a little bit dizzy, or you might be craving, you're going to kill somebody for a Coca-Cola because you just desperately need to get some sugar. So that could be the symptoms of being low. But nobody is aware of when the blood sugar goes higher than 7. And I test my clients' blood sugar when they're with me physically at least, and I very often see blood sugars higher than 7, maybe 9, maybe 10, maybe 12, and occasionally I also see it much higher, but that's very rare. But I do often see it around 10, 11, 12, which is too high basically. And when you have high blood sugar levels, then you're going to have high insulin. Unless they're very, very, very high, and then there could be problems with type 1 diabetes, which would be you have no insulin. But in general, with the blood glucose levels going around 11, 12, etc., you will typically have higher insulin levels. You're typically on your way to what we call insulin resistance, which is where your cells don't listen to the message from insulin. They don't want more glucose inside them, so they're not working together with insulin anymore. They become resistant, is what we say. Yeah. So we don't want high blood glucose, and as most people are not aware that they have it, then we don't make the changes we need to do. So it's very, very important that we measure our blood glucose levels. And as I said, you can go to the doctor, but you can also buy a little blood glucose monitor. They don't cost a lot of money. And my recommendations to my clients is get one of these and test it on a regular basis, and especially after foods, to see how the food is working, or affecting your blood glucose. But what I like them to do, or what I recommend mostly for them to do, is take a typical day. When you get up in the morning, the first thing you do is test your measure your blood glucose, and then you do it at 60-minute intervals all through the day, because then you'll be able to see what is happening to your blood glucose. Now, you need to write down what you're doing in the 60 minutes. So did you eat foods? Did you exercise? Did you go to a busy meeting? Did you have an argument with somebody? So you want to be writing down what's happening in the 60 minutes, because when you then do the next test and you plot where your blood glucose is, it might have gone up, it might have gone down, and you want to know why. That's a really, really good thing to do. One of these tests, which are home tests, which I recommend everybody to do, but especially when you're 50 plus and you want to age well, you want to know what's happening with your blood sugar. You want to know what's affecting it. So, as I said, you can get your doctor to measure what they call fasting blood glucose. But they also will offer you a test called hemoglobin A1C. So HbA1c are the letters that will appear on the blood test results. Now, what is this? Well, this is a calculation, okay? Now, you need to get a picture here. If you have a lot of glucose in your blood or sugar in your blood, we know that sugary solutions are sticky, aren't they? So your blood is sticky. So what they're measuring with the HbA1c is they're measuring the amount of glucose or sugar which is stuck to the iron in your red blood cells. So iron is heme and the hemoglobin is the red blood cells. Yeah. So how much iron has stuck to your red blood cells? It's a calculation, okay? Now, the calculation is such that it is presumed that your red blood cells have a 3-month lifespan. So they measure the amount of iron which is stuck to the glucose, and the calculation, evaluation of the 3 months, and they come with a number. And there's a reference range. If you're higher than that number, then you've had very high blood sugar during those 3 months. But as I said, it's just a calculation, and it doesn't really take into account, you might be anemic, you might not have a lot of iron, or you might be the opposite, you might have loads of iron, or your red blood cells may only live 2 months, or they might even live 4 months. So it is not the best way to evaluate your blood glucose, even though this is a gold standard measurement with the doctor. I believe it's not the best way to do it. So one of the best ways to do it is the testing every 60 minutes, or you can buy very expensively one of these continuous glucose monitors. And it is a little sensor which is on your arm, on your stomach. It's like a little plastic ring. Many people may have seen them. And on the back of the ring, there's a needle about this long which goes into your tissue. And it will measure your blood glucose constantly, basically. But you will only get the readout when you scan the sensor, and it will give you an evaluation of your blood glucose. And in this way, you will be able to see what it looks like through the 24 hours. But as I said, you could also buy a little blood glucose monitor, and you could test it every 60 minutes through the day, but you wouldn't then get to see what's happening during the night. And that can be quite an important thing as well. So that's a really good way. Another good way is to do a glucose tolerance test, as we call it. So what you will do is that you will test your blood glucose, and then you will drink a glucose solution, and then you will test your blood glucose again 2 hours later. You could also add insulin on the list here, so you could get some test kits where you also test your insulin before you do the test, and then 2 hours later. So you get the picture of what happens with the glucose and how much insulin you actually produce to get rid of the glucose, or what happens to it after the 2 hours. So that would be a very, very comprehensive and a very good way to test your blood glucose levels, okay? So as I said, measuring your blood glucose is very, very important, and it is definitely one of the tests which I recommend, especially all of you that are 50 plus, to do on a regular basis. And then if you discover that every time you eat bread, cake, or every time you eat oranges, every time, you'll then see that every time you do this, your blood sugar goes really high. Maybe, yeah? Or you'll see that when you do exercise, a different exercise is going to affect your blood glucose differently. Yeah. So high blood glucose after some high intensity exercise is not a bad thing. What is important is how quick does it come back into range again, and how does it just level off nicely, or does it drop radically, etc. Those things also will tell us quite a lot. And it could also be things like you went to this very busy, very stressful meeting, you had this argument with your partner, or with your friends, or with your colleagues, etc., and your blood glucose went sky high. All of these things are very good for you to know, because then you can make some adjustments in your lifestyle, and this will help keep your blood glucose within range, which is going to help keep your insulin within range and keep your cells sensitive to insulin. So you don't develop disease states like diabetes and obesity and cardiovascular problems, etc., etc. Okay, so check out the article in the blog with all the information about the different ways and the different measurements, because I'm pretty sure you can't remember it all now. And check the other videos, check the other articles, etc. And yeah, I will get going with the next video. Happy hormones, happy life.